The Beatles' Hey Bulldog, a surprise return to straight rock and roll just before the turmoil of the Beatles' breakup. By all accounts, one of the best examples of the lads playing and working together to create an absolute favorite. Today, we're going to show you 10 very interesting facts about the Beatles' Hey Bulldog. Let's do this. Originally, John was going to lead with the phrase, "Hey Bullfrog," which is evident in the first verse of the song. However, Paul McCartney decided to randomly bark like a dog in the middle of recording their vocal overdub. Seeing that this isn't the first time the boys decided to woof like puppies, recalling back to one of their Christmas albums.
Before I pass you over to Paul.
John is taken by the addition and switched the remaining lyrics to "Hey Bulldog." So, why did Paul invoke the sound of a canine? Well, just a few days before recording Hey Bulldog, Paul had played drums on Paul Jones's song called The Dog Presides, which had featured barking sound effects. So evidently, he was inspired and thus helped John change the song from Hey Bullfrog to Hey Bulldog. But either way, I bet Paul's dog Martha didn't mind at all. Before the frogs and puppy dog tales, this song had the working titles "She Can Talk to Me" or "You Can Talk to Me." In February 1968, John had actually made a demo recording of just a small piece of the song in his music room of his Weybridge home. John sussing out the backing chords and singing over and over again, "She Can Talk to Me." And that little recording is the beginning of the song's evolution. John was well aware that people were trying to dissect the Beatles' lyrics and find meaning, even if there really wasn't any. John actually even received a letter from a student at Quarry Bank School who told him his literature teacher was discussing his lyrics as part of his lessons. This ultimately led John to not so subtly leave lines in his songs mocking this effort with, "You think you know me, but you haven't got a clue." John even went as far to comment on the lyrics of "I Am the Walrus" by stating, "Let the fuckers work that one out." Ultimately, John's perspective on the song is clear. He says rather matter-of-factly, "It's a good sounding record that means nothing." The Beatles were contractually obligated to write songs for their upcoming Yellow Submarine film. This isn't the first time they had to compose songs solely for their business deals, but John was getting quite irritated by the forced creativity. John says, "That's me, because of the Yellow Submarine people who were gross animals apart from the guy who drew the paintings for the movie. They lifted all the ideas of the movie out of our heads and didn't give us any credit. We had nothing to do with that movie, and we sort of resented them. It was the third movie that we owed United Artists. Brian had set it up and we had nothing to do with it. But I liked the movie, the artwork. They wanted another song, so I knocked off Hey Bulldog." In what would end up being one of the best known footage of a true Beatles recording session, a film crew was commissioned to create a promotional film for Lady Madonna, because the Beatles would soon after recording Hey Bulldog go off to India. The Lady Madonna music video is made up largely of the Beatles either playing Hey Bulldog, stage performances, and Paul playing Lady Madonna on the piano. George Harrison recalls how both films came to be. He says, "When we were in the studio recording Bulldog, apparently it was at a time when they needed some footage for something else, some other record, and a film crew came along and filmed us. Then they cut up the footage and used some of the shots for something else. But it was Neil Aspinall who found out that when you watched and listened to what the original thing was, we were recording Bulldog. This was apparently the only time we were actually filmed recording something. So what Neil did was, he put it all together again and put the Bulldog soundtrack onto it, and there it was." This little song that John essentially brought in as an effort to kill two birds with one stone, using the recording time more effectively, John asked if he could, quote, "whip one off," referring to laying down the groundwork for Hey Bulldog. He played the nearly completed song for the Beatles, and after some revision and input from the band, they were off. The track was going so well that John actually even campaigned for it to be on the A-side with The Inner Light, instead of Lady Madonna. However, Paul obviously didn't want his song Lady Madonna to be replaced. Ultimately, George Martin shut down the discussion by saying it was far too late to make the change because the record sleeves had already been printed. It's understandable that they may have thought that Lady Madonna would perform better, but as time goes on, I hear a lot more fans' appreciation for Hey Bulldog than I've ever heard for Lady Madonna. To be completely honest, Lady Madonna doesn't really make it on my Beatles rotation nearly as much as Hey Bulldog. Although there were always some friendly competition between John and Paul, and George for that matter, this is a really nice moment in Beatles history because this is about the time where things are going to get a whole lot worse and eventually lead to the breakup. But as it can be heard, they had a lot of fun making this one, and all that barking and carrying on as John and Paul were ad-libbing, it just gave a mood of better times, before it all fell apart. Geoff Emerick has a lovely quote about that time they spent together. He says, "John and Paul gathered around a microphone for several minutes of barking, howling, and general clowning around. For those moments, they were again the inseparable childhood friends they had once been, uninhibited and completely comfortable in each other's presence." Geoff Emerick has often said that the Hey Bulldog sessions was one of their final true group efforts, and every single member was bringing something to the table. After recording, they left for India, and when they came back, they were recording and composing more and more apart. But Hey Bulldog was a shining light compared to what was to come. Geoff says, "Even though it was destined to be given to the Yellow Submarine film, Hey Bulldog was a really strong song. The vibe that day was great. All four Beatles were in an exceptionally good mood because they knew that they would be heading to India in a matter of days. Despite the fact that there was a film crew underfoot, it was a Sunday session, so things were quite relaxed. The Abbey Road complex was largely deserted, and the Beatles could wander around the corridors if they wanted to." Well, it's no secret that George Harrison and his food is an internet meme, but I thought for this interesting fact, we'd talk about something silly. After they had laid down the rhythm track, everyone in the studio was famished, so Mal Evans went down to the studio canteen and brought back baked beans on toast, which is one of George Harrison's favorites. Hey Bulldog came from humble beginnings to becoming one of the most surprisingly popular Beatles songs. It's a straight rock and roller and returned to Beatles' equal contribution form. When I listen to the song now, I always see it as the calm before the storm. There were happy moments before and after, despite the breakup. But I think the reason people love this song is the reason people dig the Beatles. They were fun, and they had fun. Remember, George Martin didn't sign them because he thought they were great musicians. He signed them because they were so charming. It was a breath of fresh air. The simple fact that there's all that laughter and barking and silliness is not only great, but vital to the band's appeal. They can write heartbreaking songs like Julia and transportative songs like Tomorrow Never Knows. But there has to be room for playfulness, not taking it so seriously, and just having fun doing what you enjoy, even if that means barking like a dog.
Hey man, what's that, boy? What do you say? I said, you don't anymore.
This episode was suggested by friend of the show, comedian and actor Benny Arthur, whom you may have seen on Comedy Central's Drunk History. If you're a history buff, which if you're watching the Hollyhobs, then you probably are, and someone who enjoys the occasional alcohol abuse, as you can see from my holiday episode.
It's the worst drink in the universe. Let's go across the universe and have a drink. Terrible.
Then Drunk History is most likely up your alley. Well, that's all for today, everyone. Like and subscribe and follow us here, and I'll see you next time.
I don't want to drink John Lennon's drink! But I'm still drinking.